All right, so I'm Adamson from Veeam Software. I'm going to have a talk to you today about how our software works, 5 of the sort of the major features. We'll do a bit of an overview as well, and we'll jump in and have a look at some of those features, 3G willing, but should hopefully be able to send you away with a good idea of where the product fits and how it can assist you in just trying to meet some of those needs around backup and disaster recovery in your vSphere environment. I guess to begin with, we've got that idea that Veeam is really optimized for that virtual environment. So built for VMware from the inside out, from bottom up, everything is aligned with that story. So if your infrastructure from a VMware perspective has been well architected, well built, we're going to sit on top of that really nicely and be able to take advantage of that. And in terms of those outcomes that we expect now from a virtual environment, everything happening, very quickly, everything we talk about Veeam speed, really fast, meeting your expectations and making sure that you're hitting all those RPOs and RTOs. So 5 major things that we'll hit in the presentation. Very quick recovery of VMs, so something that we're all focused on, making sure that we've got that ability to not only back up, but recover in a timely fashion. Working with our replication piece to potentially do replication at same site, different site, across the WAN, on demand, continuously, all different methods. But essentially looking at host-to-host replication within VMware, making sure that we've got those cold spares ready to go in the event that we have a disaster. The under-the-hood features which make vSphere backup superior. So basically with that, we're just going to have a look at, again, not just where the product fits, but the advantages that you get from that. So something that's not just backing up from within the virtual machines, but because it's fully aware of what constitutes those VMs, how they fit together, what parts you've taken, and how you can put it straight back into the environment the way it was. So making sure that we've got that knowledge. Plus, we're going to have a look at how with Management Suite you can extend your management of the backup solution, the data management solution, making sure that you've got really great transparency, capacity planning for your data stores, and that kind of thing. And we'll give you a bit of a sneak preview of one of the great features which is coming up as well. So just a quick overview. Agentless is no longer sort of the amazing buzzword that it was, but it's worth just covering off because we'll have people of different varying knowledge levels in the room, making sure that everybody understands that basic advantage of making sure that the software is not using agents. So obviously when we move to that environment that's virtualized, we're talking about consolidating hardware, having lots of different systems running on a common hardware platform. So where we can, it makes sense to consolidate all kinds of other things as well. So we're making savings across the board in terms of how many storage infrastructures we're having to maintain, how many operating systems we're having to maintain, all of that kind of stuff. We can do that on the backup front as well. So not having to insert software onto each individual VM or for applications within a VM, being able to understand the virtual environment and work with that and leverage that to get our backups out. So quickly look at the sort of traditional environment of having the agents within VMs. Obviously the systems administration overhead is kind of okay when you're talking about a smaller environment. Once you start to get into a larger environment, there's a bit more of an overhead there. And once you get into very large environments, it becomes really difficult to manage. So you can understand how by simply replicating what you would have in a physical environment, which is agent per machine, multiple agents per machine, you're really not getting one of those promises of virtualization, which is to simplify and consolidate. Yeah, that's sort of how that goes. In an agentless architecture, we take a bit more of a clever look at how the hypervisor is put together, and we place some strategic pieces within that infrastructure that allow us to read and move and write the data the way we need to. So we call those proxies, and they're sort of data transport services, which give us that ability to move the data around within the environment in a clever way. So getting as close to the source and as close to the destination as possible, and making sure that we're attached to your, be it your storage or a NAS or however. So also accounting for multi-site environments. And you can see there that by going through the proxy, we're getting the 3 VMs with that administration overhead that we've got, which is the pieces that we need to have installed. But then when we scale up, we're still using that same infrastructure to back up those VMs. So we're talking about a single point for many VMs rather than having point per VM or multiple points per VM. So you can see once we really start to scale up, We're working with a scalable proxy architecture, so indeed we're not going to obviously push any size architecture through a single application. We're going to scale that out horizontally while we maintain a single point of management, so the product comes with a manager of manager, which gives it that overall view, speeding everything up. But what we're talking about is an ability to scale out intelligently, making sure that we're not having to have this proliferation of agents going on. PowerPoint is stuck. Yeah, I've broken it with animations. Okay, so one of the main things that we want to try and address is this sense that when we lose a VM, the clock really starts ticking, right? We've got everybody looking for that service, looking for whatever constitutes that server within our environment. And because the consumer expectation now is sort of at this 24/7, everything's on all the time, there's not really that inherent understanding that perhaps there used to be. So in our environments, IP would go down, potentially aspects of the business would be able to tolerate that for a period of time. Increasingly, that can't be tolerated at all. So what we tend to find is there's an expectation that things will be fixed instantly without any impact, and then people will want an explanation afterwards. So those days of sort of flying under the radar are certainly gone. So with Instant VM recovery in our product, what we can help you do is to really reduce that time between when a service goes down and having that service back up and running within the environment from your backup files. So not having to restore the whole VM back onto production storage before you present it to VMware, but really being able to leverage the fact that everything is virtualized to show that VM back into the virtual environment from within the compressed read-only deduplicated backup file. So if we have a look at how it works, have a VM that's gone bad, it goes to heaven. The normal reaction is sort of, what are we going to do, run around? When we've got the Veeam product in there, we're able to, as I say, leverage those existing Veeam backup files and very quickly bring that back into our environment. So the way that we're doing that is to present a temporary NAS mount into where those files sit. For all intents and purposes, what VMware sees is the data store which has that VM presented on it into the environment. And from there, we're able to use storage vMotion. If you don't have storage vMotion, the back end of Veeam can do it as well, to transition that back onto production storage in the background. So obviously, the service itself is presented back into production very quickly, and then full service or full production, what you would expect performance from that, will be complete once you get that transition back onto the production storage. So the kind of times we generally see, and we'll have a look in a second, are a couple of minutes, okay? So getting that presented back into VMware, and then what you'll be waiting for is just for the operating system to boot and the services to start. And that's just dependent generally on your infrastructure itself. So I'll just show you quickly if demos are permitting. Just a show of hands, who's using Veeam at the moment? Is there anyone in the room who's sort of at that point? Yeah, good. And who's heard of Veeam before? Yeah, good. Okay, let's see if I can find this other screen. Is it there? Yeah, there we go. I went to yell out, it's like a pantomime. All right. Okay. So you can see here within the lab, we've got our Veeam console, which is pretty straightforward and easy to interpret. The backups residing within that console, we're able to do a number of things with. So here we manage the jobs, get them backing up. Down here, we're just getting the points of access into our virtual environment, be it through vCenter or the hosts individually. And then we've got some job management features down here, so being able to do additionally replicas, which we'll have a look at. This will monitor any sort of active things that are happening within the environment, and here we can look at the backups that we can restore from. So let me just show you. So this is a list of all the backup jobs that we've currently got in the system. We'll have a look at one of these. I might just grab one of the small VMs. You replica demo 2. So this is only a relatively small VM. And if we wanted to restore that VM back into the environment without having to transfer it out of the backup file, it's the instant VM recovery option that we'd have a look at. We'll just run through that process. We'll put it somewhere where it's not going to cause too much trouble. So it allows you to either restore it back into the original location if you've completely lost the machine, or you can restore it to a different host with different settings if you need to. So it just depends a little bit on your scenario. Once you have it within the environment, obviously as well, you can do clever things like isolate that network if you do need to have the machine on at the same time as the production machine. And you can also do things like shift around in the environment once you've got it up and running. It can be good for doing some testing as well. If you've got a host that is at a different site or is disconnected on the network, that'll allow you to do some testing before you do something in the live environment. Love a live demo. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just put this into one of the resource pools. And we'll just have it disconnected from the network, but we'll have it power on. So we'll just get an idea. I just want to give you an idea of the time frames around the restore. So obviously what we're looking at as a comparison is that any process that is involved before you have that VM up and running. So if you're having to bring it back from tape or to stream the backup file out onto your production storage, all of that is largely unnecessary to get to the point where you've got an instant VM recovery running. All of that you can sort of do more as an afterthought. So the emphasis here is on just getting the VM up and booted. You can see here, time frames so far running sort of about 25 seconds. Had a minute or two in staging there. And the demo gods have abandoned me. All right, I might come back to that in a minute. I've got a couple that are running. So if we have a look here in the environment, here we're using a feature which will bring up a number of the VMs together using the same methodology. So you can see we've got a domain controller and a SharePoint server running in the lab together. Have a look at the time frames that were around those ones. You can see here the publishing and the reconfiguring in itself only takes a couple of minutes, all things being equal, and if the demo gods don't evacuate and leave you with an error. But the time that you need to take into account also obviously is the time that it takes for the operating system on the VM to boot. So usually those times will be around 10 to 15 minutes, and again, just constrained by your infrastructure. So if you've got all of your backups sitting on a NAS that you bought at Officeworks, that's not necessarily going to be the best outcome, but if you've got your nearline backup stored somewhere which has reasonably fast storage and connectivity into the host, you're going to get those up pretty quickly. So at least it's something that you can test and you can know where you're at in terms of what the SLAs are around those restores. Now, I'll just jump back into slides. All right, so again, just to go over that process, bringing the file out from the backup file, presenting it into the hypervisor. Once that's presented, we're then able to move all of that storage across from the backup file into the storage. Now, we can extend this process as well by making sure that not only are we covering ourselves off to those backup scenarios where we're losing a whole server or part of a server and needing to do a restore, which is either file level, application level, or the whole server level, we're also able to do the host-to-host replication part. So on the same host in a different data store to another host at the local site or to a host over the WAN, you're able to do to different versions of VMware if necessary, making sure that you've got cold spares with multiple versions of those VMs ready to go. So being able to use inherently within VMware, either to boot the machine or to go to one of the rollback points, which are just in the snapshot tree of that VM, all from within the vSphere client. So even if you lose all of your Veeam infrastructure in your disaster, you're able to still bring those machines up very quickly. If you architect it correctly and you have your Veeam replication server at the destination site, you're able to do managed failover and failback, all very neat within the product, and make sure that you're able to maximize that failback essentially. So making sure that you're not having to do a backup and take it back to the original site and do what's essentially a reverse replication. That you're able to just use point and click wizards to bring that back online at the production side. That disaster, rough, and then we've brought it up on the other side. So that can be really good in consort with some other products as well. So we have people who use SRM for one tier and they'll use Veeam for another tier. And again, for poor links, people will tend to have some issues maybe around SRM. So we're sort of robust and optimized for the WAN to some extent as well. So those remote office, branch office scenarios can be pretty good. So understanding how you get the benefits of not just backing up the data within the VM, not just backing up the files and the application information into another database, another set of files, but by making sure that you've got full awareness of what's going on within that virtualized infrastructure, what constitutes the VM. So obviously we've got VMDKs, we've got the vNICs, we've got all the stuff that constitutes the VM. If we throw all that information away, it's going to make it so that it's a less optimized restore. By having all of that knowledge, what we can do is make sure that you're getting the most seamless introduction of those machines back into the environment, essentially, and also things like being able to ensure that when we restore a whole machine, be it to the same or a different location, VMware's understanding of that machine is going to be that it's essentially the same. So that can be good for us, and we can have difficulty with that on other fronts, where if we're having to create essentially a new VM and inject the old data into it, rather than that, what we're getting is the full benefit of having that VM restored in its entirety. So the other stuff that's built in, probably the fast SCP stuff that people are used to, that's all been folded now into the backup product. So if you get the free version of the backup product, that gives you the ability to move VMs within your environment and do migrations and things like that. So that is still there, although that tool no longer exists. If you install the free version of backup and replication, which is called Veeam Zip now, it allows you to do all those moves and migrations, and it also allows you to do point-in-time backup. So you can back up an individual VM, put it into a Veeam file set, and then you can do restores, which leverage things like our Exchange Explorer for restoring mailboxes and things like that, all within the free product. So that's worth having a look at if you haven't seen it or had to play with it yet. PowerPoint's a bit sad today. All right. So when we talk about the granular file and application restores, individual files, obviously part and parcel, bringing up that snapshot view, being able to do my computer browsing, copy and paste files out, also being able to restore files back to their original location, individual files restored by service desk operators and things like that, all of that sort of part and parcel. But when we talk about the application restores, obviously we want to make sure that we're across being able to bring back any of that information that's lost from within our business apps. So Exchange, SQL, and Active Directory all have wizards within the product. But beyond that, you're also able to architect your own application restore labs. So if you have, say, a 3-part business system you need to restore from, being able to bring all of those VMs up automatically within an isolated lab and to perform restores from there, all of that functionality is built into the product as well. So even if you've got quite unusual setup, different operating systems and things like that, you can use that to architect a restore solution. So Exchange 2010 plus, we have now Veeam Explorer for Exchange, which is a new feature, and that's the way that things are heading in terms of our restore experience. So not having to spin up the VM with Exchange on it, and not having to spin up the DC, which is previously how our universal application item restore has worked, but being able to hook straight into the snapshot, render up the data store, and do restores from there. So that's a very strong experience for people who are struggling with Exchange restores at the moment. Being able to reduce that right down to a couple of minutes, being able to action restores while you're still on the phone to a person who's having an issue, for instance, for individual mail items, whole mailboxes, folders, or the whole data store if you need to. So that'll do things like export to PST, back into the data store, or you can email individual items from within the console. So that's pretty neat for Exchange. That's been extended also to our SAN Explorer, which we'll try and have a look at. Hopefully we'll be able to demo that. But what that's showing is that we're starting to align with the storage vendors in terms of being able to give you the Veeam restore experience, but from the SAN snapshots. So at the moment it's HP left-hand and VSA. We're able to leverage their snapshots, but give you instant VM recovery, individual item recovery and things from within that SAN snapshot. So not having to run the hypervisor level snapshots at all. So that's the Veeam Explorer for Exchange console, as you can see there. What we've also got is advanced find functionality, which is kind of cool, particularly for people who don't have an archiving solution for their email, because you can jump into the data store as of a point in time and do quite advanced query-based searching to bring up all the items that match a particular set of criteria. So that can be pretty handy if you've got some compliance requirements, or if somebody comes to you from HR and needs to see emails from this person to that person, all of that's sort of built in there as well. And again, that works in the free version of backup and replication as well. So for those items that are within applications which are not Active Directory, SQL, or Exchange, we have the virtual labbing. So within a virtual lab, you can define networking, and you can define which part of the virtual environment you want to allocate for use, and then you can say which virtual machines from within your backup files you want to present so that they can interact with each other. So as an example, if we have in the virtual lab a machine, come on, PowerPoint. There we go, something's happening. Okay, so if we bring back an app server, also the domain controller, we're able to have interaction between those two. Now that's in that restore scenario we're talking about where you maybe want to make sure that that application is actually going to run. Beyond being able to get the operating system to boot, you also need to be able to connect to the application and ensure that that's running. You can have all that automated as well. So this can happen unattended at night, for instance, and send you a report to say, yeah, from the backup, the DC started, the application started, we're able to query that application and get a particular response, shut it all down, and then you've got an assurance that that backup's going to start. In terms of being able to do the restores, once we're in that position, obviously we're able to architect that in such a way that all the applications are up and running. We can bring out information from that system and present it back into the production system as well. So that can be pretty powerful. Management suite for data protection. So has anyone ever had a look at Veeam 1? People who are using Veeam products? Yeah. So it's sort of our monitoring and reporting products. Looks only at the hypervisor. So it's giving you good visibility into the hypervisor. But basically what we're focusing on now with that product is the ability to manage your data management story as well. So being able to look back at Veeam backup and replication and do neat things like being able to capacity plan for where your proxies are and how they're operating, capacity planning for repositories. So do you have enough space on an ongoing basis to maintain the retention policy that you've got, or are you going to run into issues with that in the future? So all of that kind of stuff, just getting a higher level of awareness and taking out a lot of that manual work that's involved with just keeping things running. So the goal there obviously being that you're having less bumps on the road, just being able to maintain that backup infrastructure and making sure that you're not going to run into a situation where you're going to have to miss an RPO or miss an RTO because you've had a problem with that infrastructure. So being able to rely on it. Essentially, I guess being powerful and easy to use is great, but everything has to be working. So making sure that you've got transparency into any issues before they occur is sort of the focus there. So management suite bundles backup and replication and Veeam-1 together and allows you to license them as a single product. So increasingly, you'll probably see information around that and the interaction between the two. So the monitoring component gives us sort of real-time dashboarding and things like that. And on the reporting side, we're able to do, I had a couple of reports here for you. Some pretty gnarly lag. And here, for instance, I mean, if you have a report generated periodically that comes into somebody's mailbox, being able to understand, for instance, which VMs are not protected at all is pretty valuable information, being able to ensure that they're contained within a backup job. I guess the other thing is with virtualization, we enter into a shared situation where we increasingly have systems that are administrated by multiple people, so it can be difficult to catch these things, particularly if someone has a reason for excluding something from a job which subsequently becomes invalid and things like that. So just maintaining a constant touch on exactly what's going on within the infrastructure can be pretty strong. Another one here for you as well, and again, just having these, the ability to schedule these reports so that you're getting them regularly. This one's about repository management. So again, maintaining that confidence that there's enough space there for the backups, there's enough space there for the backups for the next month, next 6 months, based on your retention policy and your rate of growth and all that kind of stuff. So not having to do a lot of manual work around, guesswork around that, not having to buy a whole lot of spindles just because you think you might need them to contain the backups, but being able to do that in a more intelligent way. So that can be pretty powerful. I know that's one that I definitely struggle with as an administrator, so it can give you a lot more transparency into all of that. Now, one more thing, if I can get back to PowerPoint. Yeah. We have now coming up also is integration into the vSphere web client. So you can look forward to being able to get quite a bit of this stuff. This is a preview from next release. So it's special just for VMUG people. It's not generally been released yet. But being able to start to look at it as just another part of that VMware infrastructure and being able to collapse that into the administrative view that you've got there. So something that I get asked for several times a week and people not wanting to step out from a single console more than they have to. And it's something that, you know, I know a lot of the guys are looking forward to. So in terms of what we've looked at, VM recovery in minutes. So moving in a lot of cases from a scenario where we're having to create an empty VM, inject the data in, have multiple processes, reducing that down to a single right-click operation and having that VM come back online really makes a lot more sense in a lot of cases. And also means that that decision to restore is often reduced as well. So rather than spending 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour stepping through that resolution process, if we know that we can reliably restore quite quickly, we'll be inclined to do that rather than to have resources eaten up just trying to sort things out. The replication piece, again, no additional cost with that. So with Veeam licensing, everything's all inclusive. There's no additional agents or anything like that. So when you have the product in, you're able to leverage that product for multiple purposes. So if you're just using backup or just using replication, you get the other part for free. It's a competitive price point for either one of those applications on its own. And then you're essentially able to leverage the other half of that operation as well. So replicating between sites, replicating to the same site for additional redundancy, all of that stuff is possible. Again, obviously, just being VMware aware and fully integrated within that experience. Management suite, if you haven't had a look at it, definitely check out maybe some of the YouTube videos are a good place to start because you can get a really good feel for how much information we're dragging in there and where the limits of the software are as well, because it is quite focused on that hypervisor level. So we're not, for instance, monitoring anything physical. It's all just within the hypervisor. Able to do some cool stuff though, like carving up the infrastructure for different owners and things like that. So if you've got different segments of the business, being able to understand who owns what. And again, providing that transparency into Veeam backup and replication just from the vSphere web client. Now I've got some time for some questions. Has anybody got any questions for me? Aside from why my demo didn't work, which I'm not quite sure. So that's one thing within the product you get some intelligence on, which is kind of cool. If you install the trial and run a backup, one of the things that you'll get is the backup analysis. Look, in most cases, from what I see, it'll be target storage because people will have a second or third tier of storage for their backups. And the other thing most likely I'll see is that machine that has the proxy service installed will have a very minimal amount of CPU or RAM. Because it's handling a lot of data and you've got CPU and RAM demands for the compression and the dedupe, just making sure that that's properly provisioned. But again, because you're able to get that within the logging, it can be pretty easy to sort of put your finger on what's going on. So you're talking about actually across the network? Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. So so you're saying with the Jumbo Packet Exchange, are we aligned with that network transfer basically? Yeah, so all of the parts of Veeam sit pretty much on top of Windows. So it's pretty much all intrinsic within that Windows system. So as long as everything's well configured in terms of the NIC and everything in that environment, we'll take advantage of everything that we can in terms of getting the data moved as quickly as we can. So again, presentation of storage into Veeam will be through that Windows layer as well. So if you present the SAN to Windows, we can leverage that SAN, but with understanding of how that SAN works. So doing things like we'll ask the host, where on the SAN do those VMs live? Once we have that information, it won't interrogate the host all the time. It'll just go straight to the SAN. Okay. Yep, so there's multiple layers of protection around the process, if you like. So what it is, obviously, is two VMware servers. We've got the backup on this to try and make sure that at every point we're still working with data that is not corrupt. If it does become corrupt, like if that machine does become so that the job cannot make that correlation anymore, you do have to remediate it somehow. And it might be that you need to take a seed back up to the other site. In most cases, certainly in Melbourne, people aren't able to stream the whole machine across the site. We're starting to see a bit more in Western Australia now, people like 10 gig, 1 gig all over the place, but you'd probably be pushed to send your whole infrastructure across your link. But yeah, essentially, we're not going to have multiple copies of that data, which is, I suppose, what you would need to really protect against a complete corruption. But again, it's individual blocks being inserted into VMware with controls around that. So essentially, you shouldn't run into many issues, and I certainly haven't seen many where it's been an issue. But if it does break, you just need to sort of reseed the replication. Anything else? So all of the licensing as well is per socket of protected or monitored machines. So in terms of that, it's counting up the sockets, and that allows you to do it. On the disaster recovery side, there's no licensing required. So if you're replicating, you're only going to be looking at the machines that you need to replicate. Nothing in the data center would need to be licensed in that case. All right. Well, thanks for your time. I'm not going to try and troubleshoot my lab in front of you, but if you want to see a demo or have a chat, do come and see me at the booth later on. And thanks very much for your time.